Can you beat the rap? I mean, that's a question that gets asked all the time. There's an expression that's utilized when dealing with the FBI or dealing with these kinds of government attacks. You can beat the rap, but you can't beat the ride. For President Trump, it's a question of can he beat the rap? Because the indictment has listed the 37 counts put forth by the special counsel, Jack Smith. They're not good at all. Now, this is not a conversation just yet about the double standard. We're going to get into that. This real horrific moment in American society where you see that people like Hillary Clinton don't get charged. Joe Biden, there might not even be an investigation while you have these, what seems to be very credible conversations about the possibilities of bribes. Yet Donald Trump, they can say, pick the target, personalize it, freeze it, and polarize it. That's a take off from Saul Alinsky, of course, and continue to find something until they actually find something. This isn't the America that we know. And that has, for many people, been the story. As a matter of fact, I think that is the story. But for Trump, he can't get to that story until he figures out how to beat the rap that he may have created for himself. Guys, welcome to the show. Good to be with you. Presented by Americans for Prosperity, americansforprosperity.org, economic liberty and free speech. Let me bring in William Jacobson, the mind behind legalinsurrection.com. Of course, Cornell law professor as well. Now, I bring up to you, William Jacobson, the idea that before we get to the attacks on Trump, before we get to the no view of what Hillary Clinton has done, no conversation of Joe Biden, Donald Trump has to get through this. So first, you looked at the indictment, the 37 pages or 49 pages of indictment, 37 counts. What does this indictment say to you? How bad, in your legal opinion, is it?
Well, let's keep in mind it's an indictment. So it's the evidence or some of the evidence that the prosecutors presented to the grand jury. It's not all of the evidence. We don't know if the allegations there are true. These are prosecutors. Their goal is to get an indictment. So take everything that's in there as being subject to actual proof. So when they say Trump said something or did something, presumably they have a good faith ground for that, but that's not the whole story. And I think that's particularly true with regard to the obstruction of justice charges. What you have is a small number of snippets of things that Trump said that really there's no context to them. And a lot of them are, well, what if we didn't comply? What if we didn't play ball with them? Is that obstruction? Is that a client asking an attorney for an opinion? What was the attorney's opinion? Did the conversation go any further? So particularly as to the obstruction, the indictment, while it rings loudly, I'm not sure if there's how much there is to it. You'd have to hear the testimony. The most troubling part of it is they say they have a recording of Trump acknowledging that a document he was holding had never been declassified, and they allege it was about battle plans to invade another country. People are speculating that's Iran, and that it was in some manner shown to people who were interviewing Trump. But it doesn't say in what manner. Were they able to read it? How close were they? So there's a lot there. There's certainly a lot there that's shock and awe, and that takes this likely out of the realm of a hoax, out of the realm of Russia collusion. But how strong a case it is really remains to be seen.
Part of this back and forth was, before we get into certain parts of how you beat this, that you have lawyers saying that Trump asked them to destroy documents, that you have them on the record in this indictment saying that we were asked to do this, as just as a conversation of, that's a hard one to overcome, I assume. That's a hard one to overcome. We believe that the lawyers made it up?
No, I think the question is, what was the actual full conversation? Were they asked to destroy documents? Was it a question that Trump asked? And certainly, you could have a nod and a wink to do that. Did they actually do it? What was the conversation? So we only have little pieces. And again, it's probably enough to sustain the indictment, but whether it's enough to sustain a conviction, what did the attorneys think they were being told to do? Did they think they were being told to destroy documents? Or was this Donald Trump just being Donald Trump again, bragging about how, look, Hillary got away with it. Her people destroyed all 30,000 pages of documents. So I think that there's enough there to sustain the indictment, but we really need to know the full context. If Trump was suggesting that, documents be destroyed, did the attorneys actually do it? Is this more of an attempted obstruction of justice as opposed to an actual obstruction of justice? There's a lot in the indictment about the moving of boxes.
A tremendous amount.
But there's no allegation in there that I recall. It is 49 pages. I've read it multiple times, but there's none that I recall that he had actual knowledge that there were documents in the boxes that were moved that were the subject of the subpoena. Maybe he did. Maybe someone will testify to that. But the mere moving of boxes, while it certainly is suggestive of misconduct, doesn't necessarily prove that it was part of a plan to obstruct justice. So that's what I'm saying. This is an indictment that comes across as a very public relations oriented document. They knew there would be, fury from Team Trump, from Trump himself, from Trump supporters. So they felt they needed to put more in there. But I'm not sure they've put enough in there to actually prove their case, as opposed to getting past the hurdle of sustaining an indictment.
Talking to William Jacobson, Cornell law professor, the mind behind legalinsurrection.com. Let me share this with you. This is Congressman Jim Jordan referring to the case as he has been for a while now, Navy versus Egan, 1988 Supreme Court case. Listen to this on CNN.
Again, Dana, the standard is the standard. The President of the United States, he can classify and he can control access to national security information however he wants. That's the standard. That's the Constitution. That's what the court said in Navy versus Egan, a 1988 case. I don't know how many more times I can say it.
Okay,
so if he wants to store material in a box in a bathroom, if he wants to store it in a box on a stage, he can do that. That is just what the law and the standard is. Again, I think this just underscores how political this whole thing is. Jack Smith, you know how political it is when they selected Jack Smith as a special counsel. I actually sat in a deposition with Jack Smith. We deposed him on May 29th, 2014, because he was looking to prosecute people who were targeted by Obama's IRS, people Lois Lerner was going after.
Sir,
we can get into the conversation. Was Jack Smith playing the part of Beria, show me the man and I'll show you the crime, just find anything, as opposed to following the facts? But I want to go back to this first part. This what Congressman Jordan is putting forth as an idea is that literally the taking of the documents is the declassifying of the documents, which is an argument that's been made. And it doesn't matter where he had the documents. You may not like it, but it doesn't necessarily make it illegal. From what Congressman Jordan is saying there, is that a defense?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, and I'm not going to get out over my skis on that. That's a claim that has been made by the Trump side. There are other people who say that's nonsense as a matter of law, and that the case that they cite really isn't on point. It's a different thing. So I don't know if that's valid, but there is supposedly a recording of Trump telling these reporters or people interviewing him that I've got this document. I could have declassified it, but I didn't. So I don't know how that's going to hold up as a factual matter, whatever the law is. Just getting back for a moment on this obstruction of justice, one of the key pieces of evidence in the indictment is an affidavit submitted by Trump's lawyer with regard to the collection of records. And what the affidavit said is, based on information provided to me, et cetera, all documents have been diligently searched, et cetera. And they're saying that's a false affidavit, but they're ignoring the part of the affidavit that said, based on the information provided to me. If you're a prosecutor, if you're, the Justice Department, and a lawyer says, you ask for an affidavit of compliance with the subpoena, and the lawyer says, well, based on what I've been told, we complied. that lawyer may be actually making a truthful statement. Based on what that lawyer has been told, there's been compliance. Why didn't the Justice Department go back to the lawyer and say, hey, this is not good enough. We need an affidavit or a declaration by a person with knowledge as to what was done. So the key piece of evidence, which is a supposedly false affidavit, may literally be true, that based on the information provided to the lawyer, there had been compliance. And so a lot of things in this affidavit, in the indictment, that sound really, really horrible may be subject to attack.
There is, in your voice, in your conversation, talking to William Jacobson, Cornell law professor. Check out his site, legalinsurrection.com, and the foundations that he runs about educational freedom and critical race theory. You can find it all there at legalinsurrection.com. There is within your voice, in your presentation, the belief that maybe this rap is beatable, that possibly Jack Smith, the special counsel, what the DOJ put together was the very best they could put together. But the truth is, it's not enough. If you are Trump's legal team, you feel confident going into that courtroom. He's surrendering on Tuesday. He's going to go into that courtroom. And if you do, why did some of his legal team resign on the spot the minute the indictment came out?
Yeah, I don't know what the reason for their resignation was, so I can't speak to that. And certainly what I'm saying is that the indictment, which as an indictment is taken as, the God's honest full truth, may not be. It may be a slanted presentation. That's going to require the, judicial system and Trump's defense to point out whether it's accurate. So I'm not making a prediction as to whether he can or cannot beat these charges. All I'm saying is that people are taking the indictment as if it's, the gospel, as if there's no way to challenge it. And a lot of these things, just on their face, seem very questionable to me. Some seem stronger, such as the supposed recording of him admitting he's showing someone a document that's not been declassified. Some of them in the indictment come out as maybe not as strong as they're claiming. And to me, that's particularly the obstruction of justice charges.
Let's get to something William Barr said, the former attorney general under Donald Trump. In his view, this is all really, really bad for Trump. Listen.
Well, it started out under the Presidential Records Act and the archives trying to retrieve documents that Trump had no right to have. But it quickly became clear that what the government was really worried about were these classified and very sensitive documents. I was shocked by the degree of sensitivity of these documents and how many there were, frankly. And so the government's agenda was to get those, protect those documents and get them out. And I think it was perfectly appropriate to do that. It was the right thing to do. And I think the counts under the Espionage Act that he willfully retained those documents are solid counts. Now, I do think we have to wait and see what the defense says and what proves to be true. But I do think that even half what Andy McCarthy said, which is if even half of it is true, then he's toast. I mean, that's a
statement saying that a guy is toast. The feel out there is that this is much stronger of a case than people thought it would be. Are you arguing that? I shouldn't say it that way. On a scale of 1 to 10, what is the uphill battle that the Trump legal team has ahead of them?
Yeah, I can't put a number on it, but clearly when you have the full force of the federal Department of Justice coming after you, when they have called witnesses before a grand jury, when they have made allegations that, as Bill Barr says, are very serious, you have an uphill fight for any defendant. So nothing I've said is a prediction of an outcome. It's really that there's a process that has to take place here, and that process will challenge a lot of the things that are in the indictment. And I think we need to let that play out. We should not take it as a foregone conclusion that the indictment is everything we need to know. We need to know more, like I've said, about these conversations. What else was said? We need to know more about the moving of boxes, and what did Trump know at the time the boxes were moved. We need to know what the affidavit, how that came about. So all I'm saying is this poses a very serious threat. I think I said that on a prior show with you, that two things can be true at the same time, and they appear to be true, that Donald Trump has been unfairly targeted for 7 years by every level of law enforcement. They have subjected him to a scrutiny that really nobody else has been subjected to. They have been trying to find a crime that he committed. It appears that some of the things in the indictment were things they found out as part of their investigation. So they wouldn't have been known but for the investigation. And those are all true. It's terribly unfair to our nation as a society to have an individual targeted and have their life subject to scrutiny in search of a crime. At the same time, we live in the real world, and we live in the reality that whatever the feds found by virtue of that politically tainted investigation, they found. The evidence is going to be it. And some of it, and many people have commented on this, is that Donald Trump appears to have handed them what they've been looking for 7 years. He may have handed them an actual criminal charge here.
Now, to that end, and we did hear William Barr say, if this is true, if that is true, the other is true, I want to at least give credit where it's true. One of the other people indicted is a guy by the name of Walt Nauta, N-A-U-T-A, I believe I'm pronouncing it properly, Donald Trump's valet. The whole purpose of indicting Nauta is to see how much pressure you could put on him, how much you could squeeze him to give up this, that, and the other. This guy is the sacrificial lamb to trying to get Trump. I mean, from an outsider looking in, holy cow, is that an ugly thing to do to a guy?
Yeah, I mean, but that happens all the time in prosecutions, in investigations. They try to squeeze somebody. They try to tell them, look, you can either help us and tell us what you know, or you're facing 25 years in jail. And 99.9% of people will succumb to that pressure. Happens all the time, whether it's good or bad, ethical or not. It happens all the time. It's the choice defendants have to make. So it seems to be, they don't really want to put, Trump's body man who moved boxes in jail. Maybe they do want to, but that's not the point of this whole indictment. The point is to get him to flip, to get him to give them more than they already have. And the fact that they felt the need to name him and to indict him and to try to flip him may be an indication they need a little bit more than they actually have.
It's interesting listening to you in this, and then we have spoken many times over the years. And one of the reasons I talk to you is that you're a fair arbiter of what's actually happening. And there are times you will demur and be like, I can't answer that question. You are the first person I hear to paint a much possibly rosier opportunity for Trump than others we've heard out there, and where some of the issues in this may lie. That is not to say that the indictment in and of itself isn't problematic for Trump. It is. I would say that. I think that's clear because it's an indictment. But for many of us, it has been the conversation of Trump gets indicted, but Hillary didn't. Hillary's case was a case, according to James Comey, then FBI director, no reasonable prosecutor would go after. We have these allegations regarding Joe Biden. This is incredible stuff. $5 million bribes and what we know from the Hunter Biden laptop, et cetera. And we don't know if we're going to get an investigation at all. It is this double standard conversation. I hate to use a term so cliche, but there is no better term for it, sir. It is this double standard conversation that has people absolutely apoplectic. Does the DOJ give any rationale that is acceptable in your view, in your legal view, about why yes here and why no here?
I don't think they feel the need to give an explanation. And legally, I'm not sure they need to give an explanation. The fact that you were pulled over for speeding, but there were 3 other people on the highway speeding even faster than you are, doesn't exonerate you. That may be a political defense, and Trump may get a lot of political mileage, and it appears he is, through this double standard argument. But I don't think in court that really makes a difference. They're either going to prove their case that he committed the listed crimes, or they're not. The fact that somebody else may have done that is really a political matter. And let me be clear, James Comey choosing not to prosecute or go forward with the prosecution of Hillary, both at the time and certainly in hindsight, is really hard to explain. Just the other day, I went back and I reread the transcript of his, I think it was July 5, 2016. And he spends, and I remember watching it at the time, we all were watching it. He spends 19 minutes explaining how what she did was deliberate, how what she did was sloppy, it was negligent, it was reckless. She was using a personal server that was likely subject to surveillance by foreign governments when she was traveling, her email account through that private server for government business, how a lot of her excuses for what went on didn't hold water, and everybody's waiting for him to say, okay, now you're going to finally prosecute her. And at the end of the day, he says no reasonable prosecutor would bring the case. And part of those factors is it was in the middle of a campaign season. It was in the middle of a presidential election. That has to weigh on a prosecutorial discretion. And I think the same is true here, that we are not quite as deep into the season as when the Hillary decision was made, but we're in political campaign season. And I think that the question needs to be, was there any real damage to national security from this? That may not be an element of the crime, but it certainly needs to enter into prosecutorial discretion. There's no allegation that any of these documents, which were kept in boxes that tipped over and on stages and actually fell into enemy hands. There's no allegation that there was an actual harm to national security from this. What the allegation is that it put national security at risk. And that might be true. And again, actual damage to national security may not be an element of the crime, but it certainly should enter into a prosecutorial decision when you're going after the leading candidate of one major party who is a former president, and you're going to have a massive interference in the election in ways we can't even really predict right now. It may help Trump. It may hurt Trump. It's certainly going to be a factor. It's going to be disruptive. It's going to hurt other Republican candidates whose attempts to get noticed are being drowned out by the media around this, being drowned out by Republican rally around effect. So this has enormous implications for our presidential election. And in that circumstance where you're not alleging actual damage to national security, I think that should have factored into the prosecutorial decision to move forward.
William Jacobson is his name. Legal Insurrection is where you find everything. Legalinsurrection.com. Also find all of his videos now on Rumble. They've brought everything over to the Rumble platform, so you can find everything for Legalinsurrection.com over at Rumble, and be sure to subscribe. William Jacobson, I appreciate you taking the time to be with us, and don't forget to keep subscribing on Rumble to what we're doing over here, and share the videos far and wide. Greatly appreciate you, and I'll catch you next time. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? You know what I forgot to say? I got so excited. My thanks to Americans for Prosperity, Economic Liberty, Free Speech. That's what it's all about. AmericansForProsperity.org. They pay the bills. I better remember. I better remember. They advertise. They don't choose content, but still be respectful. That's the plan. I'll catch you guys